Political prisoner is one that is incarcerated for reasons other than proof of committing a crime, for political reasons, to hide other people's wrongdoings, usually government, but somebody who cannot get out without the political influence that Leonard needs to get out.
Free Leonard Peltier! 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 Do you wanna get free? Say yeah! Oh, we want freedom, and we want it.
Saludos and welcome to When We Fight, We Win, the podcast. I am Dey Hernandez, joined by my co-host, Greg Joby Needs. Today, we come to the end of our Season 3 with our last episode that calls in the spirit of Crazy Horse of the Lakota tribe. We invite you to listen with an open heart as we have as our guest today the co-director for the International Leonard Peltier Defense Committee, Carol Gokee. In this heartfelt and honest interview, Carol shares who Leonard truly is and why we must demand his freedom so he and his people can finally return home.
And a lot of people in Canada and the U.S. call you a political prisoner. What does that mean to you?
Well, it's believed somebody that's been in prison for their ideology, somebody that's been convicted falsely.
On the other hand, shooting cops is frowned upon most places, ideology notwithstanding.
Right, I believe it's frowned on all over the world. But we got to remember, too, now, the agency that we're speaking about right here was not totally innocent of crimes themselves on the reservation.
Did you do it?
No.
The voice that you just heard is that of a younger Leonard Peltier from the Anishinaabe and Dakota tribes. He is a former American Indian Movement member and U.S. political prisoner who was falsely accused of first-degree murder at the Pine Ridge Reservation in 1975. The agency that he refers to is that of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, commonly known as the FBI. As political prisoner, Mumia Abu-Jamal says, Leonard has, quote, been in the clutches of the U.S. prison, the Iron House of the Whites, as Indigenous people call them, close quote, for over 4 decades.
As our guest today, we're honored to have Carol Gokee. Carol has been a human rights defender her entire life, focusing on Native American rights. Her family comes from the Anishinaabe Nation of Wisconsin. She also creates food and clothing drives for our unsheltered relatives around the Midwest. As an elder mother and grandmother, Carol works on teaching others how to show respect, love, and kindness to each other as we all struggle in a world full of oppression.
Hello, my name is Carol Gokee. I am the co-director for the International Leonard Peltier Defense Committee. I reside in Marshall, Wisconsin, and my family is Anishinaabe. Leonard Peltier is a political prisoner being held in a maximum security prison in Coleman, Florida. He's been there for over 47 years with his good time. He was charged, actually incarcerated in 1976 for a charge of first-degree murder on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation that occurred June 26, 1975. At this time, the American Indian movement was very new to the world in standing up and voicing rights for treaty rights, human rights, land rights. the rights to have their children taken out of these boarding schools, the right to practice their ceremony. And it was a lot of unrest, and where you had some traditional natives who wanted the old heritage and culture to not get lost, then you had some newer natives that were all about industry and making money. And the tribal government was such like that they wanted to line their pockets with the government wanted land in South Dakota. It was rich in minerals, rich in uranium, lithium, you name it. We had 36 known energy companies in South Dakota and 75 at that time. 7 or 9 of them were invested in Pine Ridge at the time. They wanted that land. And so what they were doing was they were funding the tribal government with weaponry, because the traditionals needed to sign up in order for that land to be transferred to the government. And they refused. That was all the land that they had left, and they were not going to sign. So the tribal government decided to start strong-arming them, terrorizing them, brutalizing them, murdering them, raping the women, you name it. When the American Indian movement found out and were asked to come and help protect them, they came. They came to do that, to help protect elders, to protect women and children against the tyranny of Dick Wilson and the U.S. government, U.S. Marshals, BIA police, and FBI. And it was just a lot of unrest, a lot of people getting shot on the side of the road, you name it. Leonard and the group that were on this particular property woke up to pancakes that morning and then gunfire. And when they came up from their camp, they seen 2 men, plain clothes, in unmarked cars, shooting into their camp. They had no clue what was going on, but they knew they had to protect the women and the children and get them into safety and then shoot back. They didn't know what was going on. They didn't know who these 2 men were, if they were with the tribal government, if they were with the U.S. government. They did not acknowledge who they were when they came in shooting. That story is still disputable to this day. With that said, Leonard Peltier and the rest of them ran. It was the largest manhunt in U.S. history. Leonard was able to escape to Canada because he has dual citizenship up there. And there was all children except for 4 adults that were there. I think that the government thought that was easy target. Unfortunately, there was a 10-year-old, a 14-year-old, 15-year-old. They were all young kids, and the government did not care. They were shooting at them all. They did not care. A defense attorney was allowed to introduce all of the evidence into the trial. And because it was self-defense, nobody knew who these men were, and they came in shooting. Well, that made our government mad that these men were not charged. So they said at that point, somebody's going to pay for this, and it's going to be Leonard Peltier. So they were able to find him in Canada, and they extradited him based on a coerced witness statement from a woman who never even met Leonard, who stated that she saw Leonard walk right up to these agents and shoot them in the head, which even the government's acknowledged that was falsified. And when we tried to get that extradition reversed, our U.S. government said, you know what? Well, yeah, we did lie to get him here, but we got the bad guy. And the reality is that Leonard never even shot at these agents. These agents, by the time he got up there, they were already gone. They tried Leonard, not in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. They tried him in Fargo in a very, very racist court with a very racist judge. They did it intentionally. They did not allow the same information to be introduced into court. They did not want Leonard to be acquitted based on self-defense. They had racist jurors. Leonard's lawyer, in fact, allowed them to move this to Fargo that didn't even have jurisdiction. So there was just a lot of crazy things that happened with this trial. Even the jurors were led in and out of the courtroom in a bus with blackened windows, telling them that the Indians are going to kill them otherwise. Put the fear of God into these jurors when it wasn't like that.
We asked Carol why the government targeted Leonard, and the response took us back to the land. The government wanted the land, so occupying the land became an act of defiance for many independence and freedom fighters. The American Indian movement was formed in the late 60s to organize Indigenous leaders to raise their voices against high unemployment, slum housing, and racism. They also fought for their right to uphold their treaties and ways of life, and to resist assimilation and relocation.
Because Leonard was one of the many American Indian movement members who stood up and said, we've got people in here that want this land and they're willing to take people's lives for it. And we're going to stand up for them, just like the Black Panthers. When minority groups that are getting oppressed, stand up and speak up for themselves, the government hushes them. And Leonard is no different. That's why, see, they made the mistake of sending those two men in there. They sent them to their death. The government did that. But in order for them not to be blamed for this, they have to blame somebody else. So politically, it had to be Leonard because there was nobody left. And you have to remember, this is back in the J. Edgar Hoover era, back in 1975. It's not the same. We hope it's not the same right now, but it's COINTELPRO. Counterintelligence program that used every tactic that they could to get the people who are making the most noise and causing them trouble in purchasing land and acquiring resources from Native Americans. And they would do it at any cost. We know that. They've done it with assimilation. They've done it with genocide. They've done it with termination, with sterilization. My God, what else will they do to get that land? People are expendable to entities that want to line their pocket. We don't matter at all. And Leonard Peltier has never mattered to the government, and he needs to start mattering to them right now. He needs to start mattering to Joe Biden.
The land is generous. The land is resourceful. Even in the reservation, the land had many resources and the government wanted it badly. And so to target the freedom fighters, not only from the American Indian movement, but the Black Freedom Movement, Puerto Rican Independence Movement, and other liberation movements, COINTELPRO was created. COINTELPRO was the Federal Bureau of Investigation, or FBI's counterintelligence program, which covertly ran from 1956 to 1971. COINTELPRO conducted surveillance and infiltration, and also discredited and neutralized many of these political organizations. Their strategy included actions that led to murder and fabrication of many court cases.
The government wanted the land, even though they put Native Americans on reservation land, then they find out that that reservation land is full of minerals. So now what do? Now we're going to take them, we're going to break up their land, that's assimilation, and we're going to move some of them to the cities. We're going to relocate them because they need to learn how to live in our culture. What they would do is bring Native Americans to the bigger cities and just drop them off. And most of their children been taken away from them and put in boarding schools. They didn't have any choice left. You know what? We got to survive. And maybe alcoholism, drug addiction. You know, they didn't have places to live. They were miserable. The trauma that these people in South Dakota and North Dakota and other states, but these especially are the ones that I know about, they went through hell. And so the American Indian movement was formed to stop those different forms of genocide and to bring about treaty reform and to bring that land back. The Black Hills, I'm up in Rapid City, South Dakota. The Black Hills were stolen from the Lakota people, and they need to be returned back to them. The American Indian movement was formed for that purpose, and so they ended up occupying the Wounded Knee. And a lot of you have heard about, back in 1890 was the massacre on Wounded Knee, where many women and children were murdered after they took their arms away from them, which some of them didn't even have. Unarmed people chasing them. Anyways, they occupied the church there and wanted to bring about attention to the world of what was going on. Dick Wilson was the tribal chairman, and he really wanted to line his pockets. He wanted signatures for that land. So all of it coupled together became a time bomb And Dick Wilson wasn't getting anywhere with selling that land with the American Indian movement there. So he brought in the big guns. He brought in the U.S. Marshals. He brought in the BIA police, the FBI, and he got funding from them. They had heavy artillery. After Wounded Knee, the American Indian movement did the longest walk to Washington, D.C., in which they occupied the BIA building. And that's when they found out about sterilization processes. They were sterilizing women and young girls that were coming in for regular procedures. They were all getting sterilized. Okay, so none of their children could stand up to them and say, you're not taking our land, you're not taking our resources. But they didn't want to do that. They were trying to stop genocide, a culture of people, because they were in their way. Again, this is why they were occupying things. Tensions were high. There was a lot of murders already. There was over 100 incidents in which over 65 people were murdered. The rest were brutalized. Some people are missing from that time because Dick Wilson wanted American Indian movement gone. So he got the government, COINTELPRO, to start pointing fingers at the American Indian movement was killing their own people because they were informants. It was all lies. It was all lies. None of that was ever proven. In fact, to the contrary, we have a lot of proof that it was a lot of the goons, the guardians of the Oglala Nation, those were the henchmen of the tribal chairman. So we know who killed these people, and we're still working on getting investigations done for FBI misconduct in the 70s.
Richard Wilson, also known as Dick Wilson, was the illegitimate chairman of the Pine Ridge Tribal Council. Tribal government vultures like Wilson and the goons fed off of government funding to destabilize the communities inside the reservation. They saw the land and the energy parks as lucrative businesses. Violence continued on the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota throughout the rest of the 1970s, with many American Indian movement members and allies tragically losing their lives in confrontation with the U.S. government.
The FBI created propaganda and an assortment of false stories around Leonard to discredit him and support his capture. Carol recalls how the integrity of Leonard stood intact at the one chance he had at escaping into his freedom.
Well, there's always been FBI propaganda since this. Leonard was incarcerated in 1977, and they thought, we'll be done with this now. Okay, we won't look like we ended these men's life. This guy is in prison, and he's going to take the rap for it. We're done. Didn't work out that way because we stood up. Leonard Peltier has had a defense committee ever since he's been in there, and we stood up. In fact, they wrote a book called In the Spirit of Crazy Horse. Was kept off the shelves for 9 years, but that tells the story. That tells everything. And then the story got out, and Leonard became very popular in prison. So the government decided that, you know what? We need to get rid of this man. We need to get rid of him. So they put a hit out on him. Another Native American came to him and told him what was going on, says, I can't kill you. I can't do this. I've met you. Leonard is a good man. He's a kind man. He's one of the most giving people you'd ever meet. Leonard's never lived a life of violence or disrespect in any way. In fact, it's just the opposite. The man's never owned more than 2 shirts in his whole life because he gives what he has to others. So anyways, Lompoc, they did escape. 3 of them escaped. 1 was shot and killed. 1 was captured, and Leonard got away. And after 10 days, Leonard was starving and ended up in a field of pumpkins and got caught by a farmer who had him at gunpoint. Leonard overpowered him, and the farmer is like, oh my God, are you going to kill me? And Leonard says, no, I'm not going to kill you. I'm not a murderer. I'm not a murderer. I just want your truck. Can I have your truck? And the guy's like, you can have my truck. And Leonard knew that the guy was going to run to his house and call the police. So he didn't want to tie him up because he could have died of exposure. It was Southern California. It's real cold at night. So he took his boots. He didn't get but a mile down the road when he realized how stupid that was. So he left the truck and went off into the woods, and then they found him, of course. And even in court, it was brought up by his defense attorney that Leonard Peltier could have been a free man. Had Leonard Peltier been a violent man, or a man who didn't respect life, he would have lived because the farmer would have died, or he would have tied him up. But the farmer didn't die. Leonard Peltier felt that it was more important for this man to live than it was for him to gain his freedom. He could have took that truck to Canada. He could have been free, but he chose life. Same with his first parole hearing. They asked him to tell the truth and take responsibility. He says, I can't do that. I didn't kill anybody. I'm never going to tell you that I killed anybody. And of course, they denied his parole because of it. And it's just saddening that, because through the years now, we have been able to unearth ballistic reports. This is what the jury in Fargo heard, was a falsified ballistic statement saying that Leonard Peltier's gun, the bullets were fired from his gun. They were found in the trunk of the FBI agent's car. And so it was proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that Leonard Peltier went right up to them. And then after the Freedom of Information Act in 1991, we were able to unearth the falsified ballistic reports that show Leonard Peltier's gun was not involved in any of the shootings. You'd think that would have been enough for a retrial. You think that would have been enough for an appeal. But when you have a government that is constantly showing their power and their strength, you're going to have compromised judges. We have proof of backdoor visits with judges. But Leonard, the last man standing, is who got railroaded. And to know Leonard, he's an accomplished artist, an accomplished author and poet. And when you read this man's words and you see his paintings, you know what kind of heart he has. You know that that's not the heart of a murderer or a man who disrespects others. You know? So that's who Leonard Peltier is. And that's why we fight. And we will fight forever for him.
In the shadowed night, sometimes in the shadowed night, I become spirit. The walls, the bars, the gratings dissolve into light, and I unloosen my soul and fly through the inner darkness of my being. I become transparent, a bright shadow, a bird of dreams singing from the tree of life.
Listening to Leonard's words written from inside prison remind us of the character of many like him, who still live inside prison cells only for the crime of loving freedom and loving life. As an elder who is also a political prisoner, he still manages to share his art and vision with younger generations.
And to understand what a political prisoner is, we take it to the Word of the Day, hosted by Jorge Diaz, co-director of Agitarte.
My name is Jorge Diaz, and the word of the day is political prisoner, a term used to speak about someone imprisoned by the state for their political actions or beliefs. This includes being targeted for a specific political act that the state decides is criminal and being subjected to false or exaggerated charges because of conflicting and often unrelated political beliefs. The United States has always targeted those who oppose its genocidal, white supremacist, imperialist project, and therefore has a long history of detaining political prisoners. While it is impossible to give an exact number, there are currently many political prisoners in the United States. From well-known prisoners like Mumia Abu-Jamal and Leonard Peltier, to lesser-known ones like Josh Williams, who was targeted for participating in the 2014 Ferguson uprising. Former political prisoners include Puerto Rican independentistas Oscar López Rivera and Elizama Escobar, and whistleblower Chelsea Manning. Political prisoners are targeted to punish and demobilize people who are seen as a threat by the state and to delegitimize the struggles for liberation in the eyes of the public. Current political prisoners are incarcerated for their work protecting indigenous lands and water, resisting oppressive imperialist governments, seeking freedom for colonized territories, protesting police violence, and other radical movement work for liberation. Additionally, criminalization and imprisonment is always a political choice on the part of the state. For example, the repressive and criminalizing war on drugs has been waged disproportionately on Black and brown communities by both federal and state authorities in the United States for over 50 years. While imprisoned, many people become radicalized by understanding the economic, social, and political conditions which led to their incarceration. Once radicalized, and while fighting for justice and their basic rights in prison, they are targeted and retaliated against for their political ideas and actions. We must support the people imprisoned by the state for seeking justice and the liberation of all peoples. We must fight for their freedom, because when we fight for political prisoners to be free, we win. This is the word of the day.
Leonard never received a fair trial. When he asked to properly cross-examine the witnesses after the manufactured evidence that was presented by the government, the judge denied it. We next hear about the recent updates on the legal case and how we can support the call for his clemency.
Well, again, Leonard's been in there for almost 47 years. He's went through quite a few presidents because what's happened is that judicially, after the mistrial was denied on a technicality, the appeals were denied on, like I said, backdoor meetings. Everything judicially to get Leonard out has been exhausted. Yes, there's fraud against the court, but those things should have been brought up back when they were found back in the 90s. All the lawyers that Leonard's had, we can't tell you if they were compromised. It sure looks like it. It sure looks like it. He should never be in prison. This should never have happened. What we've got to fight with right now is the clemency. And the Clinton administration was really, really close to doing it within minutes of signing it until 500 FBI agents decided to have a protest outside the White House. First and only time in U.S. history. Because back in the FBI, after Leonard was arrested, up until 1980, they were briefed. Every FBI agent that came in was briefed on Leonard's case. So they held that grudge. And FBI agents were held in about a 20-year term. So you had a lot of those that were briefed in that case and falsified information, propaganda, whatever they could. These were bad guys. These were gun-toting Indians, man, and they were there to take the good people out. That's not what was going on at all. That's what they wanted everybody to believe. But either way, Clinton did not sign. And then Obama, we had high hopes because he's a president of color, that he would have been more sensitive and respectful, and that didn't happen. In fact, he denied the clemency. We've got a president in office that has named a Native American woman to lead the Department of the Interior, to lead the Native American section of the United States, which is a huge thing. He's also said that he is going to start clemency's midterm, which is this year. Most of those FBI agents that were briefed, they're all out of that office. We also have something very, very rare. We have a letter from the former U.S. prosecuting attorney's office, James Reynolds, who was there when Leonard was charged, and he was there through the whole trial. And in this letter, he states that they theorized all kinds of different things to railroad Leonard into prison. And that for 46 years, 45 years at the time he wrote it, he has held this on his conscience. And he is demanding that Joe Biden release Leonard Peltier. Leonard got COVID back in January. And we had to fight and try to get the COVID release for him because he is eligible under the Bill Barr memo. He's not eligible under the Compassionate Release Act. He's not, because he's what's considered an old law prisoner. He was incarcerated before 1987. There's about 150 of them left. A lot of them are Black Panthers. A lot of them, they've changed the laws for. They're the only ones that have to face parole. New law prisoners, when your time is up, your time's up. But old law, you have to parole out. You will never be released. So what we have is the clemency. And what I ask people to do all the time is we say it, we say it, we say it. And it means a lot to have Americans and even people from abroad calling that White House, letting this president know, giving weight. We're the constituents of this president, letting him know by way of email, by way of letter, by way of comment line. We want Leonard Peltier released. It is time. Enough is enough. You've made your point. Let this man go free. Let him have the last few years of his life on his own land. Okay, give him that. He's never had that. Again, the farmer didn't die. He is not a violent man, and nor has he ever been.
Free Leonard Peltier! Free Leonard Peltier! I hope that Leonard can hear us in Florida where he is caged. We are with him. We want everybody who can hear us today to go to the website, who is leonardpeltier.info. This case is so important. I can't believe we have been here in Plymouth at National Day of Mourning every year after year after year, demanding freedom for him, hoping that finally he might be granted clemency. Something needs to turn around and change.
For decades, Peltier's clemency has been supported internationally by many. A statement from Leonard Peltier, written from prison, is read each year during the early hours of the annual National Day of Mourning in Plymouth, Massachusetts. The testimony you heard was from last year in front of a vast and spirited crowd who gathered on Coles Hills across the Plymouth Rock.
It's important that Americans understand that when the colonizers came here, they didn't come and say, hey, let's break some bread, let's hang out, and let's work together. It didn't happen like that. It didn't happen like that at all. That day was horrible. Native Americans tried everything they could to be kind and friendly and to give. And what happened was people took, and they took, and they took, and they took. So what's Thanksgiving to most people, where a day they give thanks, it's a day of mourning for Native Americans because it's a day that their world changed when the colonizers came here, started killing their men and their women and their children and their elders for land. For land. Something nobody should be proud of. Something America needs to face up to and take responsibility and to stop the racism and the discrimination. You know, we fight about immigration all the time, and for a culture of people to come into another land and to say, no more people allowed, and we're turning away women and children, and we're going to leave those women and those children there for predators. The audacity to do that on somebody else's land is just unfathomable. So we have a dual system here, and we try to fight. We fight for Leonard's freedom, but we also fight for the freedom of all people of color, of all people that are trying to leave countries that they'll do anything to leave because it's horrible there. There's enough room here for everybody, and there's enough food for everybody too.
We asked Carol, what does Leonard's freedom mean to Indigenous communities?
Wow, it would mean the government would finally take responsibility for their wrongdoings. We have a lot of children that are getting unearthed right now, over 10,000. And there's a little accountability, not much. a little by way of money that they've given those families. But that's not enough. He symbolizes strength and resistance to government oppression and assimilation and everything that they've fought against for the last 530 years. That's what he stands for. He's no different than Sitting Bull and Geronimo. He's taken what the government has given out in protection of his people the best that he could. He was there to protect them. This is all. This man didn't have any other reason to be there, just to protect them and keep them safe. And he did that. He was able to get the women and the children out of there safely without getting killed. There was one Native American that did die. It was Joe Stuntz. And Joe, to this day, they've never investigated his death. And they call it a death. They don't call it a murder, where when they talk about their agents, those were murdered. And Joe Stuntz was murdered. So Leonard symbolizes that struggle that's always been there, and a struggle of resistance. Instead of sitting down and cowering or doing what they want you to do, you stand up. You stand up and you fight for what's right. We have a rule among activists. You do what's right. You fight for what's right, whether it's legal or not. Because the people that set the laws set those laws for themselves, not for us. We do what's right. And we will always fight for Leonard because that's what's right.
Now an elder, Peltier requires immediate medical attention and has been waiting for this request to get approved for months. As he shares with the crowd in the statement, sickness, loneliness, and depression are constant companions in prison. But Leonard keeps them at arm's length and reaffirms he cannot ever let them overtake him. Even in the inhumane conditions of the carceral system, or the bear, as Carol states, Leonard remains grateful for the gift of life.
We try not to poke the bear too much here, okay? But the bear has its hands around Leonard, and we try to be respectful. But at the end of the day, Leonard could die at their hands. Leonard could die because they're using COVID as a weapon. They're allowing others to infect each other, and then their hands are clean. They're allowing these inmates to drink brown water from faucets, moldy cells. And in fact, when Leonard came down with COVID, I wasn't even, not the lawyer, not me, not any family members, nobody was notified because it's not in their policy to notify family members. I only knew because I have a connection to another inmate, and he got a message out that they were taking Leonard to the medical unit for 10 to 14 days. Well, what happened was they didn't put him in a medical unit. They said he had a mild case of COVID, put him in an isolation unit, which to Leonard was worse than solitary confinement. It was dirty. There was nothing in it but a bed and a faucet and a toilet. No cup for water, no food. The first 5 days he was given a pouch of peanut butter and 2 pieces of bread. This is an elder who has COVID. And he didn't have a mild case. So for that 10 days he was in there, he suffered. After 5 days, he finally got a guard to bring him a cup so that he could get water and put it in the cup. And if you run it hot, then the sediment will settle so that after it cools off, then you can drink the layer of water on the top. Otherwise, out of isolation, he has to buy bottled water. The water is not fit for consumption. And this is a man who has diabetes. Diabetes, peanut butter. Peanut butter is one of their most notorious meals at the prisons. We've had senators advocate for him, and they lie through their teeth about what they're feeding him. We know, we have him fill out daily meal logs. We know what they're feeding him. This is a man who gets pancakes for breakfast, and he's diabetic. 2 sandwiches a day, 4 pieces of bread. And they say 2 hot meals a day. A hot meal to them is pancakes and 1 scoop of oatmeal, 1 scoop, 1. And what they did when they found out Leonard was diabetic, they said, well, his A1C went down and he's lost weight. Well, you know why? Because they lowered his portion sizes. It's a 77-year-old man who has now lost almost 50 pounds because they stopped feeding him. So yes, that's what I have to say about the prisons in the United States of America. And they're no different. The Department of Corrections, state prisons, they're no different. When he got COVID, we really didn't know how that was going to affect him. We didn't even know if we were going to get a phone call if he died. And what we found out was that families don't get the phone call that they've got COVID. They do get the phone call when they have to come pick up the body. That's the only phone call that they get. People don't realize, yeah, there's people in prison all around the world, but their families are in prison with them. It's not fair that they have to go through this kind of hell. It's not fair when we say our prisons are there to rehabilitate. They're not there to rehabilitate. Leonard Peltier has been in isolation and solitary confinement for almost 10 years of his incarceration. And they tried to put him in a control unit when he first got there for his full term. A control unit, which is a room that's black, no lights, and they shove food under the door. People lose their minds. I don't understand if we're in a world where we want to try to help people and rehabilitate them, why would we want to be so cruel and heartless? Because that's who our government is. That's who they are. They do waterboard. They do torture people. You know, and they make us think that they're all high and mighty, and they're not. We need to stand up every time we see it. We can't sit idle. We can't be quiet. At the end of the day, like Martin Luther King says, it's not the words of my enemies that I fear the most. It's the silence of my friends. We will not be silent. We will not. We will always be peaceful, but we will not be silent.
There's a correlation between the prison system and reservations in the U.S. There are so many Indigenous people in jail that Leonard Peltier said, open quote, the U.S. penitentiary is the largest Indian reservation in the United States of America, close quote. According to the Prison Policy Initiative, the U.S. incarcerates a growing number of Native people. Most data excludes the Indian county jails located on tribal lands, but the number in those jails increased by 61% between 2000 and 2018. The data also reports that the confinement of Native youth is a crisis, open quote. Centuries of historical trauma manifest in Native youth as mental health and substance use issues that go untreated and can lead to status offenses or other delinquent behavior, unquote.
I'm in Rapid City right now. When I live in Wisconsin, I don't see this. I don't feel this. You get over here, this is generational trauma at its best. And it's not going to stop anytime soon. The pain and suffering these folks feel out here, it's beyond words. And the people that live away from the Dakotas, you don't even realize this place exists. You really don't. Just on Pine Ridge Reservation alone, there's 76% unemployed. Why is that? Because there's only enough employment for the other 24%. That's it. There isn't any. People living in houses that are so run down that they have to live in the basements. The mortality rate here is about the age 45. Suicide is extremely high here. I think it's higher than any other place in the country, if not the world. That's going to change. We've got a lot of beautiful groups. Indian Collective is up here in Rapid City. They do a lot to help bring attention and further action to the struggles up here. And we do what we can with the Defense Committee. I talked about him being a poet and an author and an artist. Leonard also sells those pieces of art. He doesn't keep any of it. He gives it to the committee and it's all donated back to the community. We do gift drives for children at Christmas. And then we do scholarships for Native youth. We do food and clothing drives. And if any of our brothers and sisters are coming out of incarceration or need help getting on their feet, we help with that too. And Leonard, when he is released, wants to turn the Defense Committee into a foundation to do that all the time, to help house the homeless and to feed the hungry and to warm the cold, and to take care of mental health, all the things that have been lacking all through these years, especially the last 50 years for Native America.
We asked Carol to describe what a liberated future for all of our communities look and feels like. She could not imagine it without thinking of Leonard surrounded by his friends and family and wild horses roaming free across the land.
If you've ever seen Leonard's art, he does portraits of people. He likes to do portraits. He likes to do horses or animals. There's a few paintings of Leonard and his self-portraits. He is behind bars. And I've always said to him, you can sketch, you have a pencil, you have a pad of paper. I want you to draw yourself outside of those bars. Not with the prison behind you, but with your home behind you, with your grandchildren by your side, with a big field of grass next to you that you're sitting in or you're riding a pony through. That's what I want to see. And Leonard has this bad habit of thinking that that's bad luck. Even a shoe size. Leonard, what's your shoe size? You're gonna need a new pair of shoes when you get out here. I'm not gonna give you my shoe size. That's bad luck. Wait a minute. Haven't you had 47 years of bad luck, mister? I got a feeling that by you telling me your shoe size is gonna change that. Okay? And you know what they say about luck? Luck was something the witches decided to start saying when they started saying, God be with you. They'd say, yeah, luck be with you. Right? Okay? Because luck is not our fate and our destiny. It comes from our Creator. And it comes from how we walk and how we act. And yes, we have people that will stop in front of us and stop us in our tracks and maybe incarcerate us. But and Leonard will even agree with me. His incarceration has brought attention to a lot of things that our Native Americans are dealing with. And without that incarceration, we might not have been able to see it as clearly. It's unfortunate that a man's life had to be used or sacrificed for that. But he wouldn't have wanted it any other way. This is a very empathic man. I can't tell you that I've ever met, and I've met some good, strong people and kind people, but never have I met anybody like this. This is who he is. And when you look at his art, you can see it. You can see pain. You can see suffering. But you can also see smiles, and you can see children and what his perception of the world is and what he wants it to be, for his people. He's a good man, and all he wants is good things. For all people, not just Native Americans, for all like-minded people, because we all fight the same machine, okay? And, collectively, we can do that. We can overcome that 1%. I gravitate towards bright people, okay? And it's been an honor to be here to help with Leonard and to be able to bring attention to this myself. Carry on. We're going to do our best, and hopefully we'll be out to DC pretty soon. We're going to be going to Turtle Mountain to bring prayer and to take their prayer back with us and bring attention as loud and clear as we can, as peacefully as we can. So, all right.
We are with you. Thank you.
Yes, we are.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Freedom!
in South Dakota, white militia. At Pine Ridge Red, 61 Native Americans dead. Nobody cared about the people protesting. Another broken deal, another broken treaty, another land steal. So energy companies keep their hands filled. Break resources, chanting drill, baby, drill. Crack foot resource, they kill, baby, kill. Who's the hero and the villain's the Navy SEAL? Took a man to take a stand and take aim. American Indian movement defended his rights in 75. Citizens shouted out with the FBI. 2 officers died, prosecution lied. Sentenced to life, even Barack Obama denied. Appeals for clemency, beaten in prison and mistreated. Parole hearing in July 2024, he be 79. Stand with an innocent man, rally and cry, say free Leonard. Can't unite when all is hate and divide. Religious symbols spelling.
The International Leonard Peltier Defense Committee is calling on the public to call the White House and demand the release of elder movement leader Leonard Peltier by granting executive clemency. Say you support the commutation of hashtag Leonard Peltier's sentence by calling 202-456-1111. He's held at USP Coleman 1 in Florida, registered number 89637-132.
Leonard Peltier's home community in the Turtle Mountain Reservation in North Dakota continues to plead for his return. Sign the online petition and follow hashtag RiseUpForPeltier and hashtag Free Leonard Peltier on social media. You can find the links on our resource pages. Join this fight because when we fight together, we win.
This podcast is an Agitarte media production hosted by my co-author and longtime friend, Day Hernandez, and myself, Greg Jobin Leeds. This episode was written and produced by Day Hernandez and Talia Carol Ketchumwell.
The Word of the Day was hosted by Jorge Diaz, written by Misha Swanson Barner, and edited by Tina Orlandini. Osvaldo Budet did the sound mastering for this episode. Our theme song is by Reverend Seku. Please check out his music available across all streaming platforms. If you're interested in learning more about Peltier's story, make sure to check out Leonard, Political Prisoner. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher. Our podcast art is by Jose Hernandez.
Please visit the website agitarte.org to support and donate to the project. Follow Agitarte on social media at Agitarte, AGITARTE_cultural_works. You can also visit the store to buy swag, to give a gift, and in so doing, help the people we support. There are posters, downloadable resources, stickers, and dope t-shirts with powerful messaging.
Thank you to Leonard's cousin for the soundbites. Make sure to check out more of his music at DJ Free Leonard on Instagram. We invite you to share, subscribe, and rate us wherever you get your podcasts. And follow us on Facebook and Instagram at When We Fight We Win and on Twitter at We Fight and Win. Have something on your mind? Please tweet us or email us at podcast@whenwefightwewin.com. You can also find these links and other ways to get involved at our website, whenwefightwewin.com.